everyone. Welcome back to another season of Delayed Offside. This is our second attempt at recording this, as we are too cheap to pay for Zoom Pro, and we ran out of real estate real fast, bickering and trying to get mics to work. So with that in mind, we are actually going to try to keep this a little more concise and half episode format, coming at you in new short-term, long-term listen. So like, click, subscribe. Feel free to reach out to us on YouTube and all the other different thingamajibbers that are out there, Twitter, Facebook, etc. But like that, we're going to start off with the NHL season. We're going to start off a little bit in Europe. We're going to actually start doing our Canadian previews a little bit to the west, all the way to the east, and bring it back home, hopefully by the end of the episode here. I think we're going to probably only get about halfway there. So we're going to talk about the off seasons here for some of Canada's biggest teams. And one of the teams that really didn't do as much in the offseason as people maybe had hoped for was the Vancouver Canucks. Adam, you have that set list of additions and subtractions this year?
I do. Just give me a second.
For sure. The Canucks are one of those teams that people had a lot of faith for, but had a terrible start to the season. And as the season progressed, they fired their coach. They had one of the worst, I think it was worst power play or penalty kill in almost the NHL history. And they fired their coach, Travis Green. They brought in Bruce Boudreau. And with that, all of a sudden, that team turned around and was able to, and with that, they were able to actually turn around their season and bring in, or have actually one of the better seasons moving forward in that. And the offseason looked for some promise where they were hopefully able to move some contracts, sign some big players, and commit to the team long term. However, have they done enough to make themselves into a threat in the West? You have that additions and subtractions list, Adam?
I do. Key departures were Yaroslav Halak, Brad Hunt, Lamico, and Matthew Highmore. So, I mean, really, are those key? And then what they brought in were Kuzmenko, Mikheyev, Lazar, and Dakota Joshua. So it looks like those are kind of their guys they're looking for. And of course, they got their core with Elias Pettersson, huge signing with JT Miller this summer, and Brock Besser and Horvat coming back.
So Lazar was brought in to partially to win faceoffs, and also because he was a right shot, which was something they needed. I know this from the Canucks broadcast on the last episode or last game against the Oilers. However, when you're looking at this team, one of the biggest questions on this team has always been the defensive structure. They have a very old, much slower defensive structure, but they made some big changes last year and brought in things that they thought were going to switch stuff up. I'll let Sanjay or Pilon tackle this one, what they think the problem is with the Canucks or how they think they're going to do.
Yeah, man, I don't mind taking it. I actually think Vancouver's in a good position. As you mentioned, they started off slow with Travis Green, but they brought in Boudreau, and he's a heck of a coach, and he seemed to turn things around. The problem was they just ran out of runway. It was too late in the season. They were too far back. They couldn't make up that ground. But coming into this season, there's reason for optimism on the West Coast. I actually think they're going to be a very good team, and I think they'll be battling for a playoff spot here. I think Vancouver, with their forwards, I think they're going to surprise a lot of people.
And they do have Demko, who I think is one of the better goaltenders in the NHL. So that definitely helps. I have been a bit surprised. I've been seeing a lot of projections ranking them quite high in the Pacific. I thought they'd be a bubble team, not, second place in the Pacific. Like I've seen some people project. I just don't think their defense is still good enough. Like you said, they brought in some people last year, Baron, but it didn't really help. They were still a below average defensive team. Quinn Hughes, he's a stud. He could continue to improve and but he's only one guy. And then in the forward ranks, they brought in Mikheyev. I liked Mikheyev for the Leafs. Great penalty killer, fast, lots of speed. But he scored 20 goals last year, but that was the first time he's ever scored that much before. So it'll remain to be seen if that he can actually contribute that kind of offense again, or if he is just more of a defensive specialist.
One of the other things that really popped with this team in specifics is that they've had a lot of players that we've kind of thought of as big names moving forward that were going to become NHL superstars and everything else. And as time's kind of gone on, they haven't actually attained that level. Elias Pettersson's a player that I'm not sure anyone's really sure what his limit is, his ceiling. They have had to deal with some injuries around guys like and personal issues around guys like Besser and Horvat. And those things have kind of wondered. And that was a huge reason why they kind of needed to keep JT Miller, is that he was probably one of their most consistent forwards and a huge part of that team's ability, if they're going to make the playoffs or have a push, to get there.
Yeah, JT Miller is solid. I didn't realize how many points he puts up every year. He put up like 90 some points last year, right? Like he is just quietly been very productive for Vancouver ever since he's been with Vancouver.
And it's hard to walk away from that player, but they had a situation here. If had they actually decided not to re-sign him, they could have moved him this year for a fair bit of assets to potentially flip this franchise around. Did they make the right decision in keeping him? Anybody?
I think, if go ahead, Adam.
Yeah. I think if that's the guy you're gonna, I think so. They made the best, like that's the best guy they could probably get at this point. You look over at Edmonton, you got McDavid, you look over, you got Brady Tkachuk over in Ottawa, Matthews in Toronto. Yeah, you got to keep what's getting you good. And that's one of the only pistons that were really firing. You remove that one and motor's shutting down. I'm not a car guy, but I think that's how it works.
Well, and if they think they're a playoff team, yeah, of course you keep JT Miller, right? I mean, if you were wanting to kind of restart fresh and have a bit of a restart, then that's when you would trade him. But I think they do believe. I think when Brucey came in, they got rolling, like Sanjay said, and I think they think that is their legit team. And with a whole year of him behind the bench, they can make the playoffs. So, if they have that belief in the team, then of course you would keep your best offensive player as of last year.
So speaking of Filthy Bruce, do you guys have faith that this organization with Bruce Boudreau at the helm, with Themko in the net, Demko. That's what happens when you combine those names together. Themko. The Thatcher Demko in the net, and the forward group that they have. Because you're right, like if you trade Miller, then what do you need? You need to try to get another Miller. But does this organization have what it takes to make it to the playoffs in the West?
Ooh,
we'll start with you, Adam. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I think honestly, it's a tough West. We saw what LA was capable of in pushing Edmonton to 7 games last year. Calgary arguably got stronger. Edmonton's where they're at too. Conference finalists. Like, it's gonna be tough for them.
I think they will. I think they will. Honestly, like you look at the Pacific Division, Anaheim's nowhere near contending. San Jose, nope. Seattle, nope. Vegas, who's their goalie? So it really comes down to, I think, them and LA. And
I didn't think about that.
You think of LA, yeah, everything kind of went right for them last year. They, the rookies, the young players performed better than anyone expected. They had a great season. Can they do it again?
Flames. Are you talking about the Flames again?
I'm not bringing up the Flames. I'm talking about.
No, I'm just saying, like he's like everyone had a good year. Everyone did better than they thought. I mean, that's fair.
I think they're going to be a bubble team. Like I said, I think they'll be fighting for that playoff spot all year. I think it will come down to probably between them and Vegas as to who gets in. We'll have to see how Vegas does with their health through with their players. I mean, how their goaltending is going to how their goaltending is going to be. I'm going to say Vancouver just falls short. I don't think they make it this year.
I think I'm with Ryan on this one. I feel like they are probably as close to a bubble team as there could be. But if you had to stack up and say who's going to be better, them or the Kings, I think the Kings will probably have that little piece above them, and that is going to be all the difference when it comes down to it. So for that reason, I too will also vote that this is a bubble team, but I think they will improve this year. And Bruce Boudreau he has a history of making the playoffs, so can't really count him out yet. We're going to move further to the east and head down to south to the town of Sanjay, where little Sanjay was born and bred, where he grew up chasing the cows and the horses, and like all Flames fans, a Stanley Cup.
The W's and the W's.
So Calgary had arguably the most interesting offseason out of everyone, and we'll leave that to Adam to read our departures and arrivals.
Yes, we've got our major departures in Johnny Hockey. I can't play in a hockey market, Goudreau. We got Matthew. I'm allergic to Canada. Kachuk leaving. We got Eric Goodbranson, better than those other two. Yarn Croak, Carpenter, and Brett Ritchie, who also came. Now,
Did Brett Ritchie resign with him?
Richie resigned. Yeah, he came back.
This is old.
Magazine's old.
Back, and then we've got Johnny Huberdeau, the new Johnny Hockey, right? And we've got Kevin Rooney and Nazem Kadri, the pest. And then we've got Mackenzie Weegar, who also came in. And a couple other highlighted names that are on this list are Nicholas Milosh, correct me if I'm wrong, and Dennis Gilbert.
Yes.
Yeah. So there we go.
That was honestly the craziest offseason of any team ever.
Yeah. So if you don't know what happened, then you haven't been paying attention. But essentially, two of the top forwards for the Calgary Flames, 100-point players, in Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk, both left for not greener pastures, maybe for Tkachuk, but I don't even think that's greener. Yeah, they left for southern pastures, essentially. And there was a lot of heartache in the market, which really felt that they were on the cusp of something. There was a lot of hurt feelings because things were drug out to the last minute before players said goodbye. However, Brad Treliving, who to me is like another version of Mark Bergeron, where you think he should be fired every year and then he does something and you're like, oh yeah, okay, and he's still around. And so he pulled out a magic out of his hat this year with acquiring Johnny Huberdeau and Mackenzie Weegar for one Matthew Tkachuk, and locking up and getting himself Nazem Kadri as well. And all of a sudden, Calgary looks back into it.
Sanjay, how did you handle that offseason?
Honestly, like July 1st or whenever the free agency was, when Gaudreau left, like, I was just shocked. Like, all the signs were pointing to him coming back. Like, he kept saying, like, I want to be back. And it was such a good fit here. And he was such a good player here.
Love
and
Calgary.
Then at the 11th hour, he just decided to go. And I was surprised that he went to Columbus. Like, I was like, okay, well, he's going to go to New Jersey or Philadelphia and he wants to go, closer to home. That's fine. Like, understandable. It hurts, but I understand. But when he went to Columbus, I was just like, whoa, that's so like out of left field. But yeah, I mean, and then like when Tkachuk said, I want to, get traded, I was just like, well, blow it up. Like, let's just do a rebuild because you lost your two best forwards. Like, what are you going to do? Right. Like, you're kind of screwed at that point. And then the trade that Tree Living got, I still remember the text, like my friend sent me a text and he said, whoa, do you see the trade from Florida? And I'm like pulling it up. I'm like, what happened? And I start reading the names. I'm like, Huberdeau, Weegar. I'm like, wait, those guys are good. Like, I was expecting like prospects or something. Like, when I read it, I was like, oh, these guys are like actually like legit, like all-star players. So it was just like, it kind of worked out in the end for Calgary, but like for like a week there, it was just doom and gloom. I'm like, well, it's over. Like, we're going to finish bottom 5 of the league now. But
it's interesting. Like, you make the comment that it, like, things are perked up. For example, like you ended up retaining another 100-point player. Mm-hmm. You brought in arguably like one of the most underrated defensemen in the NHL at this stage. And you signed a defensive two-way center who has just been unbelievable. It was a huge part of a Stanley Cup run. Yeah. The big trade-off has been, though, is the age of those players coming in. They traded away a fair bit of youth in losing Johnny and Matthew. And what they inherently picked up was guys who are a little bit on the tail end of their careers or closer to the tail end of their careers, not necessarily there yet. Is that a concern for the Calgary Flames moving forward? Or is that something that you don't have to worry about at all right now? And I'm going to pass that one on to Ryan.
I think short-term, Calgary improved this season. I think, you look at Mackenzie Weegar. I was actually more excited for you, Sanjay, for Weegar than even Huberdeau, because I think Weegar has proven he could be a number one defenseman. He held that fort great when Ekblad was injured, and did put up some great numbers without Ekblad. So he showed that he can be a number one defenseman, and he might be Calgary's best defenseman now. So you bring in a stud on defense like that. So now an already solid defense is even better in Calgary. And then like you're weaker on the wings, right? Like I think Gaudreau and Kachuk were probably stronger than Huberdeau, and now what is it, like Toffoli, who's going to be like on your...
Toffoli's the number one, yeah.
So I mean that's weaker, but you're stronger down the middle with Nazem Kadri, and really that's the position that's more important, is having that 1-2 punch at center. So because of that, I think short term the team's improved. Long term, I mean, eventually those other teams may win out, especially with Matthew Tkachuk going to Florida. I think he's a stud and young, and I think Florida will reap the benefits in years to come. Whereas Calgary, I think you're going to, in the years to come, will regret those contracts, because they'll start to not be able to perform to that number. But who cares? You're a contender right now. So you're still in contendership. Go for it right now and worry about the future later.
Adam, you had kind of a front row seat to the Battle of Alberta here, watching it and seeing your team face their provincial rival and just slapping the crap out of them in 5 straight games with a goaltender that everyone made fun of for how bad he was for giving up goals, soft goals. And they still were able to dominate the Calgary Flames essentially in 5 games. A thing for the ages. What does this do for the Battle of Alberta for you? And how does this make this a better rivalry? Is it help stoke the Flames, or is it because your team won so easily that it just doesn't feel like a rivalry?
You're stoking the Flames right now, Baron. Like the Oilers should hire you to like pump them up.
Well, Chico.
Yeah.
I'm shaking.
I am Reza
Ramon.
Ramon.
I'm the bad guy.
He was underrated. He was so underrated.
It doesn't scare me. It doesn't scare me. You have Markstrom, who we went up against in the second round, who had a goals against average of 5.0 in the second round of the playoffs. Baron, I don't know about you, but that doesn't scare me against what was the best defense in the NHL. They just can't stop. They can't stop a broken Draisaitl or McDavid. Come on.
All right, I just gotta say something. Okay, I just gotta add one thing. Okay, I guess I gotta stand up for my team here. Okay, their best defensive defenseman had a broken neck and was playing 2 games. So give the defense a little slack. Like you guys won't get that easy with Tanev with one arm, no neck.
A broken
Dorov had
neck.
broken ribs, and you add Uyghur. Completely different decor that is going to be going up against McDavid this year.
So I watched the Patriots. I watched the Patriots quarterback get walked off by 2 guys for having the same injury as Leon Draisaitl, who put up a NHL record in points on one leg.
You know what they say,
also
Baron?
had injury.
The leg is a long way from the heart. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It is. You are right. But I'll also say this, and this is the thing we don't talk about with the Calgary Flames. They had some of the fewest games lost to injury last year. They almost went completely till the playoffs, an uninjured team. Their best players played the entire season. That's not true for a lot of NHL teams. And that's also something that's hard to replicate a second year in a row.
But
I think that is, well, I think it is. What's the likelihood that you can be perfectly healthy for over 2 years with the lowest amount of games lost?
Yep, but when Sutter came in, he said this team is so out of shape. Like he said, these guys need to be in shape, and he got on them, made them more fit, got them working out in the offseason. They're much better shape now than they were before Sutter came in. So that has to play into it too. You take care of your body. Your body's not going to break down. And I
drink
think
the milk straight from the cow, and that goes right into the bones and just beefs them up. There's no way those bones will break.
Yeah,
exactly, man.
It did so well for his neck.
Straight
as you
from
keep
the
pointing
teeth.
out to me.
Well, that was just a bad injury. But those muscle pulls or stuff like that, like Calgary, knock on wood, hopefully doesn't get that because the team, is taking better care of their bodies than before Sutter got here. Maybe that's not coincidence.
I think the biggest question mark for me with Calgary is Markstrom, which sounds weird because he was nominated for a Vezina last year, right? But you look at his first year in Calgary, he didn't play that great, and then last year he played great, but then fell apart in the playoffs against Edmonton. Like, he played atrocious in that playoffs. So I think there's a little bit of like up and down with him. So I mean, if he can get some stability and some play solid all season long, that'll go a long way.
Just a heads up, because we're going to run out of time here in a pretty quick amount. So Calgary is probably flagged as one of the top teams in Canada, if not the entire US, like the entire NHL. Where do you see them finishing the season? Go with you, Pilon.
I think they have a good shot at winning the President's Trophy.
Oh, Sanjay?
I have them finishing second behind the Oilers in the division, honestly. I think it's going to take time to build some chemistry. Like, you can't just bring in like all new players and expect them to gel together. I think it's going to take like 10 games, and that might put them a little bit behind the 8 ball. I have no doubt they'll get there at the end of the season, but I think it might take a little bit longer than people anticipate.
Adam?
I'm completely in agreement with Sanjay.
Me too.
I think he worded it well. Yeah.
He actually, I think the first time he said something where I was like, he sounds coherent. He sounds confident. Like, I believe it. Like, I'm with him.
Yeah. No,
I have some faith in your team, Sanjay.
Okay, we got two more teams to cover, and we'll see how we do this in the next little bit. But speaking of Alberta, we're going to move up north to the Western
Red Deer Rebels
Conference finalists, but not winners, the Edmonton Oilers. So Edmonton was a team that went through a pretty big up and down season. They went, they had high hopes going into the season. They lost Mike Smith very early in the season to injury. They went through a December where they were the worst team in the NHL for December and January, like dead last in almost all stats, couldn't win a game. They lost three or four of their starting defensemen at one point in the season as well. They signed Evander Kane, which was not something that was very well looked upon. They fired their coach right after that, and things started changing. Their 5-on-5 play improved, and eventually they ended up hitting with the hot goaltender at the right time and going deep into the playoffs here into the third round. The offseason looked shaky. It looked like they were to lose Evander Kane. It looked like they were going to need two goalies, or at least a new goalie, because Smith was done, as was Mikko Koskinen. And the Edmonton Oilers were able to turn that around and have a very successful offseason in their signings. I don't know if you want to do departures and arrivals, because I kind of covered it, but your call.
Yep. We've got Duncan Keith leaving, Mikko Koskinen leaving. We traded away Zach Kassian. Kyle Turris retired. Chris Russell, Derek Brassard, and Josh Archibald. Some major signings were, Jack Campbell and Matthias Janmark. Those were the big ones, and Calvin Pickard.
Yeah. So the Oilers now are a team that has, depending on who you look at, a lot of people said like, well, they're the same team they were at the end of last year, so they haven't improved. But they did change out their goaltending. As a huge former Jack Campbell fan, Ryan, tell us what we might expect in Edmonton with him as our head person. What are you?
Well, I'm gonna let you share.
Oh, you're gonna let me go? You would too. A couple weeks ago, I pointed out to Ryan Pilon that for roughly 2 months, Jack Campbell had a sub 900 save percentage. Siv, a hockey goalie who allows many goals to be scored by the other team, causing his own team to lose the game. Yeah, I called him a Siv last year. I did, mostly to troll you, because you love things that are Leafs so much and hate them once they leave. Like how much you love Bunting but hated Hyman now.
I'm just taking all the Leafs, eh?
Say it again.
So the Oilers are just taking all the ex-Leafs, eh?
That's all we are. Yeah.
The Edmonton Leafs.
The Edmonton Leafs, yeah.
Are you guys pumped? I'm wearing an Edmonton Oilers jersey. You guys like that?
Farm team. That's a farm team jersey. Come on.
So this
is the show.
Yeah. So picking up Jack Campbell. No, I'll say exactly what I said at the end of last season. Is I love Jack Campbell. Great guy. Great teammate, and I think he does have what it takes to be a legit starter in the NHL. The issue he's had up to this point is consistency. You saw it last year where he was up until the All-Star break. I thought he was in the running for the Vezina, and then he just fell apart and had an atrocious end of the season, like really, really bad.
Like Markstrom bad? Like Markstrom playoff bad? Is that what we're saying, Sanjay?
That bad. And so, you know, consistency
too
and then
soon.
injuries, right? Like he has never been able to stay healthy within a season. So I think, you know, if he's able to get past those things, if he can overcome those and have a healthy season and find some consistency. I mean, you look at his career save percentage of .916, you know, that's an above average starter. So, I mean, if he can give that to the Oilers, that's pretty solid. I do wonder, you know, he played again behind some pretty solid defenses in LA and then in Toronto. I think he's going to see a bit more rubber playing with Edmonton. So I wonder what his save percentage will end up being like. But, you know, the way it goes with the Leafs, whenever someone leaves the Leafs, they end up having a great season. So I'm sure he'll do just okay.
Yeah. And one of the reasons that he was brought in was kind of essentially the LTIR of Mike Smith. And as we all saw in the playoffs, Mike Smith is a little bit of a wild card. What does Jack Campbell change that role in terms of what he brings to the team, Adam?
I think he brings a steadiness in net. Not to saying that Mike Smith wasn't steady, but there were moments where he would leave the net and you'd be like, what the hell is he doing? Get back, get back. Like there were so many times I would yell that, like, get in your net. This time, I think there's going to be a steadiness. I don't think he's going to travel too much within his net. He's going to stay home, let his defenseman come back. They're not going to worry about the third defenseman being the goalie. And I think that's going to bring steadier play for the Oilers and not so much high risk with the play in net.
Sanjay, you've had a chance to watch this team a couple of times. What is it about the defense that is, to you, not necessarily their strongest point? What is it about the defense that you think is lacking on this team?
Honestly, I think maybe just leadership and experience. Like, I think Duncan Keith, when he came in, he kind of brought like a stabilizing force to that back end. He's won cups, he's won Norris Olympic gold medals, like Hall of Fame player. And you take that out of the lineup. Yeah, he wasn't the same Duncan Keith that was winning, you know, Stanley Cups, but he still was a calming presence in that back end. You take him out, the young back end, Darnell Nurse, can he step up and become the number one defenseman? And kind of, you know, lead the defensive core? That remains to be seen. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Like, you know, losing Keith, I think that's going to be a big hit that people aren't really factoring in.
Adam, this is your team. I'll give you the last call of why you should be excited for the season.
This season's going to be off the hook. I think we've got some really exciting players coming up, namely Dylan Holloway, who's going to crack the lineup. He's played well so far through the preseason. The other night, he got a hat trick and an assist on a line with Draisaitl and Hyman. And, you know, they were plays that he created and, you know, drove. So he's going to be a really exciting player to watch. You know, there's going to be a lot of competition down that right side, you know, especially for playing with Connor. Is it going to be Yamamoto? Is Puljujarvi going to be in that spot? Is Hyman going to be switched over to that side as well? It's interesting. Another one that I'm interested to see who cracks that fourth line. Devin Shore, I don't mind him at all. I think he's good on the fourth line. I think he's a glue guy. And I like that they have him back as well. Warren Fogle, that's my question mark.
That's fair. Ryan, everyone else gave their opinion on the team. We're down to our final 10 minutes. So I just want your opinion of where you think the Oilers will finish. Then we're going to switch up to our next team.
I think the Oilers will do solid this year. I think I have them pegged second in the Pacific behind Calgary, and they'll be a solid playoff team.
There we go. Speaking of things that were like off the hook, Blake Wheeler is off the hook as captain of the Winnipeg Jets as he was stripped of his C by their new coach, Rick Bowness. Rick, I don't like fun in hockey Bowness, who produced one of the most boring hockey teams in the last 5 years in the Dallas Stars, has now moved to Winnipeg, where it was once a team that had like defensive aspirations. This was a team that had some of the probably the best defense core in the NHL and an elite goaltender with decent forwards. That has changed slowly over time. 2 years ago, the question mark on the Winnipeg Jets was they need to bolster their defense. They improved it, and the team took a step back. There was stories about arguments within the locker room, stories about other issues occurring, whether players were happy or not, if they were going to leave, guys asking for requests out. And the Jets have found themselves in strange territory heading into this season. Are they the team that they were a couple of years ago, 2 years ago when they got to the playoffs, or are they the team they were last year where they were scrounging around? Adam, you want to do the list of departures and arrivals, and then we'll jump to it quickly?
Yeah, we've got leaving Stastny, Svechnikov, Comrie, Sanford, and a Pilon favorite, Adam Brooks. And then we've got coming in Kevin Stenlund, David Riddick, and Kyle Capobianco.
There we go. What do we think the biggest issue is facing this team right now, son Jazzy?
The biggest issue facing the Jets, what's their identity? If someone says you're going in to play the Jets, if the Oilers are playing the Jets or the Flames, what do you expect the game to be like? If you go in to play, Boston, you know what their identity is. If you're going to play Tampa, you know what their identity is. What's Winnipeg's identity? They're kind of just like there. I mean, maybe it's just because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the Jets, but they're just kind of there. Like, Bonus will bring an identity to that team. He's a damn good coach. Like, he helped Dallas out last year. They had no right to even be in that series with Calgary, and him and the goalie, I guess, really helped them out. But I think Bonus is a heck of a coach, and I think he's going to bring a defensive structure and identity to the Jets. Will it be exciting hockey to watch? Unfortunately, probably not for the Winnipeg Jet fans.
It'll be
but winning is
to
exciting.
See if
winning is exciting.
Yes. It'll be interesting to see if he has the players willing to play defensively, because you see a lot of the top guys like Scheifele and Wheeler and Ehlers, great offensive players, but like defensively just atrocious. And
Scheifele's numbers are terrible.
Terrible. All of them are. Was it Ehlers or Connor was really bad too. Anyways, they're guys that just want to play offense and not put in the work on defense. And I mean, yeah, Baron, they did add some guys on the back end last year, but like they weren't really game changers. I still think that defense looks pretty weak. I mean, this is a team that is always dependent on two things: goaltending, right, and their special teams. When those are both strong, they end up making the playoffs. When one of them falters, then they end up falling. I do think Paul Maurice leaving is the best thing for this team. And maybe Bonus will be able to bring that defensive structure, Sanjay, that you were talking about. It'll be interesting to see if the players buy in.
Adam, is Hellebuck still the goaltender that people think he is? Is he still an elite level goaltender, or has that window crashed?
Depends how, who's playing in front of him. Really. I think I'm not going to just agree with Pilon saying, no, he's not, because
that's why I was laughing. I'm like shaking his head. So I'm excited to hear this, but go ahead.
I think he could be, and he probably
it depends.
Still
it depends. If he plays good, then he's still elite. But if he plays poorly, then he's not elite anymore. Sorry, Adam. Go ahead.
There's two Adams here. I don't even know. I was kidding. I'm seeing double.
Oh my God. Are you kidding me? Unbelievable.
I just laughed when you said depends. I was like, oh my God.
You're going
to sit on the fence so hard on this one, Adam.
10 years.
God, 10 years, hey?
Baron and I have done this for 10 years. 7 before. This is our 3rd with you guys.
I want my life back.
Buddy.
All right. So if Hellebuck is elite, is he good enough then to pull up the deficits that this team has in defense and in forward play? They have some elite scorers in Connor and Ehlers, and to some degree Scheifele still. Like, Scheifele's a good scorer, but does he good enough to anchor that team to that point anymore? Is that like, do we think that he can still do that?
I think he still can. I think so.
I don't think any goalie can unless your team's scoring. Look at
he'll
caliber goalie.
He'll need help with the offense, and he'll need help on the special teams. Like, he won't be able to do it all himself, but he can still rise above the poor defense.
Who's the backup there this year? That's the other question.
The backup is Riddick.
It is Riddick. That's right.
The problem with the Jets is their division is very tough. Like, you're with Colorado, St. Louis, Minnesota, Dallas is in there. Nashville's in there. So, I mean, it's a tough division. So just to be top 3 in that, probably not going to happen. If they make the playoffs, maybe looking at a wild card or a second wild card spot.
What I don't like is that Winnipeg has a hard time getting people. Like, it has a hard time attracting agents, and I understand that. But it's too bad because it really is a team that had enough pieces to look like it was a potential Stanley Cup contender like a short time ago. And in that time, they lost Bufflin, they lost
Trouba.
Myers, they lost Trouba.
Trouba, yeah.
Yeah, they lost. Well, he was before then. They
Well,
lost.
That's 2 Americans you named. That's the problem, maybe.
But that's their entire thing, though. Their entire thing is to grab Minnesota guys who are not far away, because Minnesota is like 5 hours from Minneapolis to Winnipeg. It's like a 5-hour drive. That is their entire thing for getting guys, because it's like Minneapolis. Looks like Minneapolis, right?
Well, why wouldn't they just play for the Wild then? If they,
Yep. Same reason why players don't play everywhere, right?
Well, I mean, like, I don't know maybe we don't have enough time to discuss this, but I think that maybe there is an issue with American players playing in smaller Canadian markets like Calgary and Winnipeg.
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with
it.
you at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've lived it, Sanjay.
I've lived it twice.
Lived it. But I do wonder though, like, it's tough. Like, that team, like, if you're a fan of that team, that's hard because it feels like you should be in rebuild once or twice already.
I felt
I think they're kind of
should
just
have rebuilt a while ago. I think that Canadian division getting the playoffs there gave them more hope than they should have had.
False hope.
Yeah.
You can see that for sure. All right, we're down to our final 2 minutes, so we're going to cap this one off. Do we think that the Winnipeg Jets are a playoff team this year? Adam?
Bubble, if anything. Fringe.
That's a good choice. Sanjay?
No, unfortunately not. I think they'll finish below in the standings. Maybe top 10 draft pick.
Ooh, worked out well for them last time. He left. And lastly, you, Pilon.
I agree with Sanjay. I don't see them making the playoffs this year.
Yeah, that's 4 of us. Unfortunately, they've received the death kiss from Delayed Offside, and as always, we're always right.
They're going to win the cup this year now.
Hey, I'd take it. That'd be fun. Anyways, with that, thanks for listening. Like, click, subscribe. Feel free to reach out to us on Twitter. This concludes our Western
Canadian
Western
teams
preview. Yeah, Canadian teams preview. Thank you.
That's right.
There we are.
And with that, we'll see you with the next episode very quickly.
For the Eastern teams.
Delayed Offside.